Hello everybody, I'm Rene Ramos, director of the Lynn and Louis Wolfson II Florida Moving Image Archives, and this is Rewind, the show that looks back on Florida's past with historic film and video. It's time for another trip back into the past, so sit back, relax, and enjoy another episode of Rewind.
He just had a few beers before he drove home that day, but life will never be the same. Florida law enforcement gets tough on drunk and drugged drivers. And Michel Cousteau tells about life on the Calypso with his famous father. This is Montage. Hello, I'm Joe Abril. Last October, a 31-year-old Fort Lauderdale man was sentenced to 30 years in prison. What he did wrong seems simple enough. He visited a friend, drank a few beers, and started to drive home. With that one minor act, he changed half a dozen lives, including his own. Nancy Ross examines the problem of alcohol, drugs, and driving in this report.
On any Friday or Saturday night, 1 out of every 10 drivers you pass on the road will be high. If you're lucky, your cars won't do more than pass each other. Those odds didn't work for Steve and Nancy Kelly. Driving home from a family get-together one Saturday night 2 years ago, they met Daniel Duska just 6 blocks from their Fort Lauderdale home. Duska introduced himself by crossing the median strip on Griffin Road in his pickup, making a left turn straight into the Kellys' Volkswagen. 2 of the 3 Kelly children asleep in the back seat were killed. Duska was intoxicated, and each day Nancy Kelly relives the horror of that Saturday night, the last time her family was together.
My head hit the windshield, and I remembered thinking to myself, why? I flew open the door, I got out of the car, and my first instinct was to get my children out of that car. Michael, who was 10 years old at the time, flew out of the back seat and said, "Get me out of here." I reached in and got Scotty, the baby. He was laying on the seat. And I grabbed him and I got out of the car and I turned around and said to this man who came running up to me, "Please get my baby out of the car." Brian was still in the car. And when he saw Brian, he got Brian out of the car. I saw him get Brian out of the car, and I knew at that very minute he was gone. A little part of my heart died, and I just knew it. I saw them take him and lie him on the ground. And meanwhile, I've got Scotty in my arms, and I don't know whether I was just too hysterical to know that Scotty was hurt or what, I don't know. But then all of a sudden the police came. There was people all over everywhere. I saw them take a yellow blanket and cover Brian up. And about that time, Michael's crying hysterically, "Mommy, please don't let Brian die." And by that time, there was so much help around that somebody came over, I don't even know who it was, came over and took the baby from me, and they realized how bad he was hurt. I didn't even know he was hurt. Michael looked at my arms and says, "Mommy, what is this?" And there was blood all over me.
Brian Kelly was 5 years old and died at the scene. 18-month-old Scotty died a few hours later. Their brother Michael survived, but to say he wasn't hurt just wouldn't be fair. The brothers were inseparable playmates, and it's still hard for Michael to understand how it all disappeared.
He's a very lonely child. He had 2 brothers that he loved and was very active with, and now he's in a room by himself. He wouldn't, for the longest time, he wouldn't sleep in the room that he shared with Brian. He just couldn't.
There's no one around to play with when there's nothing to do.
Tell me what makes you angry.
That there's no one around to play with, and that I lost my 2 brothers because of the drunk driver. And I think he should be put away for life.
Daniel Duska was arrested 3 days after the accident, following an investigation by the state attorney's office. That report uncovered Duska's past driving record. Twice before this tragedy, he had been picked up on DUI charges. At trial, Duska's blood alcohol level, which registered at 0.08%, was not admitted into evidence because the test was given 3 hours after the accident. Another piece of inadmissible evidence included Duska's own admission to the arresting officer that he had taken a drug. This could not be proven in court. More evidence problems surfaced when Nancy Kelly took the stand to describe the crash.
I was not allowed to show that feeling or anger because they did not want me to prejudice the jury.
And what happened when you actually got on the stand?
They called a recess 3 times in the very brief time that I was up there for fear that my emotions were taking over, and at one point he did ask for a mistrial.
How'd you feel about that?
I was angry. I was angry that I wasn't allowed to tell them what I've been through and how I felt.
Exactly how a grieving mother is to recap the details of her children's deaths without emotion was never quite explained to Nancy Kelly. She was taken off the stand, but arresting officers and 5 witnesses provided all that was necessary to convict Duska and get him the maximum sentence allowed by Florida law.
He was given 2 15-year sentences. He was convicted of DWI manslaughter.
To run concurrent.
To run consecutively,
right.
Which means 30 years. We got the limits of the law that it would allow for that charge.
In the legal sense, yes, he got the max, but that doesn't solve our problem, or in any way.
There isn't enough justice in the world
Right.
for what he took away.
Nothing will replace the kids.
As far as my own feelings, no. Justice will never be served for what he did to my children.
From the accident until sentencing 2 years and 2 months later, Duska was out on bail and arrested 3 more times, once for Quaalude possession. An additional year was tacked on to his 30-year sentence, which he currently serves at the Union Correctional Facility in Rayford. An appeal has been filed. Meanwhile, parole is already set for August 2003. Nancy and Steve Kelly are also confined since the accident. They don't drive anywhere ever on weekend nights, when those most likely to will have one for the road. When they go out other times, it's in the protection of a van they bought after the crash. They're also working to bring the day closer when Florida will have tougher DUI laws, including a provision making blood testing for drugs and alcohol a mandatory procedure.
Making the blood test mandatory would be a big improvement. This is, if someone knows that by refusing the test, all you're going to do is lose your license for 3 months, you'd be a fool to take the test. You'd say, no, take my license for 3 months. That beats 15 years or better in jail. But if they can make a blood test mandatory, the proof is there, it's black and white.
When this law first became before legislation a year or so ago, it was thrown out of legislation due to the fact that you are infringing upon civil rights of this drunk or drugged person to make them submit to a blood test. Well, I'd like to tell those people about civil rights. What about my civil rights as a mother? What about our civil rights of watching our children grow up and become successful? They were taken away from us, and we didn't break any laws. And I don't understand that at all.
Well, we've seen why the careless use of alcohol and other controlled substances is everyone's concern when the abuser gets behind the wheel. Part 2 of Death on the Highway looks at how offenders are being handled today, particularly in Broward County, with a focus on even stronger penalties that are soon expected to become law. Again, Nancy Ross reports.
Sir, do you understand that Officer Edward has arrested you for driving under the influence of an alcoholic beverage or narcotic drug, sir? All we need is a yes or no.
This man was driving a car one Wednesday night at about the same time you might have been driving home from dinner at a restaurant or maybe from the movies. Perhaps like the Kellys, you were visiting with family. Behind the wheel of a moving vehicle, this man is no less a potential killer than a man behind a gun. He was driving his weapon, and it could have been recklessly aimed at you.
Have you had any alcoholic beverage tonight?
Substance abuse, too much alcohol, too many drugs, is involved in taking the lives of 50,000 Americans each year, more victims than our 11-year involvement in Vietnam. It's a staggering number, together with the fact that only 1 of 2,000 impaired drivers on the road is ever caught. 4,000 DUIs were arrested in Broward County last year. It's a drop in the bucket, only 1 or 2% of what could have been taken into custody. What you're watching in action is the Broward Batmobile, a blood alcohol testing unit on wheels sponsored by Sheriff Robert Butterworth's office and the Florida Highway Patrol. The Batmobile transports testing equipment to accident scenes like this single car crash that involved drunk or drugged drivers. The driver of this Blazer had been drinking before he lost control. The vehicle flipped 3 times, scattering bodies, blood, and beer bottles on the pavement. The Bat team also travels to police stations where arrested drivers are being held for testing. There's a 90% conviction rate for videotaped cases. When the subjects are sober, all but 10% will watch themselves on tape and plead guilty as charged. For the 10% of cases that do go to court, the tapes are seen by the judge and jury and used as evidence. Sentencing of convicted DUIs varies from case to case, but the same stringent arrest procedures apply to everyone that's stopped with probable cause.
The first thing the trooper or the police officer will do is give them some type of roadside test. We'll ask them to walk a straight line, touch the tip of the nose, these type of things that can show impairment. After the person has been arrested, the roadside tests have been flunked, we'll take them to a breathalyzer machine, have them blow into the machine to verify the amount of alcohol in the blood.
Most of us know the breathalyzer measures blood alcohol concentration. What's not well known is how much alcohol can equal the illegal level of 0.10. This chart shows what it takes for a 170-pound man to become legally drunk. Let me first point out that 1 drink is equal to a 12-ounce beer or an ounce and a half of 80-proof alcohol. About 7 or 8 drinks in 2 hours would get this person to the 0.10. If he's arrested for driving under the influence and takes the breathalyzer test, he could be charged with having an illegal alcohol concentration as a separate offense. As you can see, even under the 0.10 legal level, a driver can be dangerous. The probability of an accident increases with every sip of an alcoholic beverage.
Give them the benefit of the doubt, give them 0.17.
Police officers and the medical examiner are seeing another phenomenon, mostly among DUI offenders in their late teens and 20s. The culprit in these cases, drug abuse, which a breathalyzer test cannot measure.
The most widely abused drug, or the most popular drug we're seeing, are Quaaludes, the methaqualone. And what we're seeing is the person will be killed in a traffic accident, and the medical examiner will get the deceased, and we'll get a report back of a small trace of alcohol, a low-level alcohol, 0.02, 0.03, and then traces of other drugs, methaqualone, quaalone, or Quaaludes. So what's indicating to us what the person is doing, they're taking their Quaaludes and washing them down with a beer or two.
When you combine drugs with alcohol, generally speaking, most of the drugs which poison the brain by slowing it down act with alcohol to be more than the sum of the parts. That is to say, if so much alcohol does 1 level of intoxication and so much drug does 1 level of intoxication, when you add 1 and 1, instead of coming up with 2, you come up with 3. This is called a synergistic effect, and it's seen with most of the sleeping pill type drugs.
There are as many different applications of current DUI laws as there are courtrooms. It's no secret that penalties rely on judicial discretion, the official and polite way of saying that some judges more than others believe drinking and driving is a serious offense.
The overall demeanor and attitude is very important, though, because no matter what it is, they come here and don't really think that drunk driving is anything too serious. And coming with that type of attitude, I'm much more concerned than I am with somebody who is at least verbally expressing the understanding.
What's the relationship to you of that person?
One penalty always given in Judge Shutter's court is mandatory attendance at the county DUI program. The convicted DUI pays $100 for 4 lessons on how alcohol and drugs impair the body. Substance abuse and not reckless driving is the focus of these lectures.
I think that it is wrong to think of the DUI program as having very much to do with driving, because it isn't really about driving, or it shouldn't be. This is an opportunity in a very cost-effective way to identify substance abusers, alcoholics, whatever you want to call them, drug addicts, when they're young.
Peter Brill was stopped many times for drunk driving without ever being arrested. One day, his luck ran out. He slammed into a taxi, injuring its passenger, and got caught trying to leave the scene. Brill was made to attend the DUI program as part of his sentence, which for him started a complete recovery from alcoholism.
It helped me to recognize my problem. It was a beginning. I tried to evade my problem as long as I could. I had to drink to survive, you might say. And I drove around high or drunk. No, I didn't care. And as far as hurting somebody, I never thought I would. Thank God I didn't hurt anybody seriously. But it was such a one-sided thing on my part that I didn't care about the rest of the world. I was just cared about myself.
Selfish?
Selfish, yes.
New and badly needed state DUI legislation has passed the Senate and is currently pending in the House. It became mandatory just 3 weeks ago for drivers in Broward suspected of drug abuse to submit to a blood test, and arresting officers are allowed to use reasonable force to get that sample taken. Other proposals call for mandatory jail sentences for first offenders, longer periods of license revocation, and a possible alcohol tax which would go toward alcohol rehabilitation. Each approach is different, but consistency in sentencing and public awareness are the common goals, doing whatever it takes to make us realize we are all potential offenders or possible victims.
People don't stop to realize this was a normal family, an average, everyday family, and it happened to them. They don't understand, hey, you know, it could have been us. We have got to do something to stop these people.
Miami-Dade College has career paths in anything you want to be. What's your story? Be global. Be cutting edge. Be inventive. Be investigative. Be a hero. What do you want to be? Be the best. Be you. Be MDC.
Few names need less introduction than the name Cousteau, so I want you to meet Jean-Michel Cousteau, the elder son of Jacques Cousteau and the man from the Calypso and all those wonderful documentaries that we look forward to on television. You've spent your life at sea, I would presume, have you not?
Pretty much. At the age of 7, my family pushed me overboard, and I've been in the water element ever since.
I'm just curious, what was your father's background? Had his father been at sea? Or
no, my father was a lawyer. My grandfather was a lawyer and was very much involved in the wine. We were on my father's side from Bordeaux, the area of Bordeaux. But my father, when he was a youngster, was fascinated by the water element, a very good swimmer. And pretty soon, as a teenager, when he had to make up his mind, he decided to become a naval officer. And he was also interested in filming. He was also interested in medicine. So he ended up in the Navy, and while in the Navy, got interested in diving, which led to filming, and which also, because of the stresses which you find yourself under, forced him to look into diving physiology or medicine. So he pretty much did everything he wanted to do in life.
And he still is.
He still is very active.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Well, I see those documentaries and I'm envious, as I'm sure most people are. They look like a wonderful life, exciting, great camaraderie on the Calypso. And
that's what we give the public. Now, behind the camera, it's not always that glamorous.
I'm sure
there are a lot of tedious, unpleasant, non-spectacular tasks.
Now, you're Executive Vice President of the Cousteau Society, and you live in this country most of the time. What's your main mission of the Cousteau Society? I think I know, but I want to hear you tell us.
Well, I think, you know, when I grew up in my father's environment, and I saw that what I had discovered thanks to him when I was a child was no longer there. In other words, my own backyard had been destroyed and totally raped.
The sea.
Which was in the Mediterranean Sea along the French Riviera. I became very concerned very quickly. And it became a part of myself to comprehend, understand why this was happening. And as I finally understood part of it, I found out that what my father was fighting for was something that one could comprehend. It was not just a utopic thing. And I embarked in sharing with him this concern and wanting to let more and more people know about it, more and more people try to do something about it, because if for very selfish reasons, and I like to share that with others, I want to continue living in a quality environment. I want to enjoy living. I don't want to live in my own waste, or definitely not others' wastes. I think we have to educate ourselves, and probably very, very young, as much as we can, to protect the world we live in, so it makes sense economically, it makes sense environmentally, it makes sense ecologically, and ultimately the quality of life of the generations to come will be protected.
We have some slides we want to show you of some various things that Jean will tell us as we look at them.
Well, these are people on whale watch. It's wonderful because they are learning, but there's a drawback to that, because there are more and more people wanting to go and look at whales, and now there are pressures on the whales. So, you know, management is a very important aspect. How many whales or how many people can look at the whales without disturbing their normal way of life?
Right, it's very difficult to do.
Whale diving. We've taken the whales as a symbol of an animal in danger. There are several species which are on the endangered species list, and as part of our fundraising, we've decided to sculpt certain whales, particularly the humpback whale, which is a very, very spectacular one, and we're going to see a humpback whale in a minute. These are killer whales passing by very quickly. And by making one of our divers is taking a free ride on the back of the whale.
Do they mind?
No, they don't mind. Absolutely not.
Really?
Humpback whales, which are depicted in many of our productions, are very, very nice animals which will try not to hurt you. They will pull their fins away,
gentle,
so not to run into you. Here is a mother and her calf. The typical animals, very spectacular. We've made a porcelain with the help of Cibis, which is being sold and which helps us raise funds so we can do more studies, we can do more filming. We go throughout the country, and recently, right in this community, we've had the support of Mayor's Jewelers to raise those funds, showing that these animals are an important part of their life, of our lives, and by having such sculptures, one may remember that it is part of our lives. If we lose these animals, we're losing an important aspect of the enjoyment of existence.
Right.
In other words, part of the quality of life. And they too have a role to play in the environment. Animals depend upon them, and this is in the studio as we were designing and sculpting the whale.
That's a porcelain piece.
This is a porcelain, it's a collector's item, a very few which are being sold.
Now you get some of the proceeds of every one of these sold?
Yes.
Goes to the Cousteau Society?
Yeah, it goes to the society, and it helps us in our work.
Which is a non-profit society, I presume?
We're non-profit, tax exempt.
One might
tax
guess,
deductible.
but forgive me, but one might guess that the Cousteau family is getting rich off of the wonderful films.
No, we are, it's a membership organization, non-profit, which means that the Attorney General is our silent partner. I have a salary. My father has worked for the last 40 years without receiving one penny, and has given everything that he has ever made, royalties on his books and so on, to the Cousteau Society.
And the main effort is to increase our awareness and our understanding and our protection of the sea around us and the
You should campaign
water,
for us.
the water. Well, I feel strongly about it, and of course, being in this business, trying to talk to people, I think I speak on behalf of everyone to thank you for the wonderful work you have done, the enjoyment and the renewed appreciation. I'm just worried that not enough people are listening. I don't know how we
I think with
that.
your help and with what we're doing and more films, and we are teaming up the people who are really concerned about the quality of life are getting more and more, and I believe that in the years to come we're going to see major changes.
Well, you're doing your part, and we thank you very much,
much.
Jean-Michel Cousteau. Now remember that the next time you're out in your boat and you're going to dump something overseas, don't do it. Bring it back and put it in a garbage can. We'll be right back.
Miami-Dade College has career paths in anything you want to be. What's your story? Be global. Be cutting edge. Be inventive. Be investigative. Be a hero. What do you want to be? Be the best. Be you. Be MDC.
Next week, Montage will be preempted by what promises to be an exciting NCAA basketball triple header. Join us in 2 weeks, April 3rd, when we'll see medical science working on a heartbreaking problem, couples who can't seem to have children. And we'll look at Pan Am struggling to rebuild a once mighty airline that's fallen on hard times in recent years. That's our montage for this week. I'm Joe Brill.
That's about it for this edition of Rewind. Just time to remind you that Rewind features historical film and video from the Lynn and Louis Wolfson II Florida Moving Image Archives. To see more from the Wolfson Archives collections, visit our website, wolfsonarchives.org. You can search the archives catalog and watch video online. And be sure to connect to our YouTube channel, where you will find hundreds of carefully curated clips, or link to the Wolfson Archives Facebook page to keep up with our busy calendar of historical happenings. Until next time, I'm Rene Ramos. Thanks for watching.